reality, I'm just going to feature a particular project from our lab, which is called Pointar. But first, in terms of the reasoning behind going from something that's a core object recognition problem into something like augmented reality, what's the reason for that? Well, today, the device, most of us have a device of this type in our pocket or purse or backpack. These are very powerful devices. And if any of you use augmented reality in some way, it's probably through that. You hold up your phone, for example, to translate a menu in Japanese. You could hold the phone in front of the Japanese menu and see the words change into English. So that's an example of augmented reality that's using a mobile device. But I've become increasingly convinced that in the future we will have some kind, I don't know what it's going to look like yet, but it could be a headset. It could be something that's projected from a device that you clip on, or it could be some form factor that we don't know yet. But I think that this idea that you have to take the phone out of your pocket to experience this kind of technology is going to change. So as I said, I don't know what it will look like yet, but I think that the way that kids in the future will experience, like when they go to a botanical garden, rather than taking the phone out and taking the picture of the flower and getting the ID, that there will be some kind of augmented or mixed reality experience that will deliver that information. So because I believe that's coming, I have to think about PhD students. They graduate 5 or 6 years in the future. What's the world going to look like? Well, I don't want them to do their research designed for this, because this will be obsolete by then. So this Pointar is kind of a step in that direction. So it's a projector-based augmented reality system, and it's also categorized as spatial augmented reality. So to tell you more about that spectrum, if you've never heard these terms, augmented reality, mixed reality, here's what I mean. Mixed reality describes a spectrum between real environments, which is where we're sitting right now, and a completely virtual environment, which is what you would get if you use those headsets you might have seen, where you literally strap a phone onto your face with appropriate optics, and it completely immerses you in a virtual environment. So these are two extremes. Right now, where you're looking, all of what you see is reality, at least I think it is. You're seeing real surfaces, real light, and so forth. And then over here was that other extreme where your real visual field is completely blocked. In augmented reality, whether you're using glasses or if you're using projectors that shine things onto the wall, most of what you see is real, and then some small percentage, maybe 10 to 15%, is augmented in some way. So it's mostly real, and then you project something, like you project your cooking and you project a recipe, or you're on your kitchen island preparing a meal and you have a projector above, or you're wearing a headset, and again, most of what you see is real ingredients, but you augment it in some way. Augmented virtuality, it's a kind of obscure term, but it's important to understand where it is on the spectrum. That's the other way around. That would be where you have a headset on that is primarily virtual reality, and it lets through some small percentage of pixels that are real. So, for example, you could be, you put on the headset and you're interacting with cartoon-like avatars, but the face part actually lets through the real face of people that are in the room, for example. So in augmented virtuality, most of what you see is computer generated, and then you let through some small amount of reality. So we're focused over here on the augmented reality side. Categorically speaking, as I mentioned, there's these headsets, which are currently way too big, way too heavy. Battery life is unacceptable. There's lots of things wrong with these, but you have to start somewhere. So there's these devices where you're looking through some kind of special optics and graphics get superimposed on top of it. Then there's the video see-through, which is like I described for augmented reality, where it's right in front of your eyes, but then you have one or more cameras on the other side that let in what you're seeing in the real world and put graphics on top of it. And then the other one I mentioned was projective, where you've got one or more projectors, like the one I described over your kitchen island, or on the back, like at an espresso bar, you could have a menu that's not real, it's actually just projected, and it's something you could interact with. So what we're focusing on at Cornell Tech is teleassistance. So this is helping people do things remotely. So for example, your kid moves away from home for the first time and runs into problems with plumbing or electrical or something and needs help from a parent. So in a case like that, you'd like the person that's far away to be able to give you feedback in a way that's almost as good as being right there. Now, what's happening when you watch people in person giving feedback, it's overwhelmingly about pointing and talking. So if you watch someone who's an expert help a student or an apprentice with a problem, they're describing things. So there's this verbal interaction and there's a lot of pointing, okay? So we are trying to take that part, those two fundamental pieces, and replicate that with a relatively simple system. And the kind of use cases you could have here, I mentioned earlier, meal preparation is an example. Another would be construction applications, like putting together Legos or IKEA furniture, or like this example with a circuit breaker panel. And so we actually put together a prototype with a very simple system built on Android things, and this is pretty low-cost hardware. And the basic idea here, and to bring this to life, we actually teamed up with a startup company that we met in New York City. They're Portland-based, but we met them here in the city. There's this company called Stream that matches up homeowners with home repair professionals through a partnership with Home Advisor. And so what we thought was, when you're working with a remote professional, a FaceTime or a Skype video chat is certainly helpful in terms of seeing the person and showing the problem that you're working on. But what we wanted to add was this ability to point, and that's what PointR does. So the idea with this is we got the laser pointer to be able to follow an object, or to, more generally, to get it to point at an object or a point of interest. So this is just an early demo where we're just moving around the phone and the laser is trying to follow it. So the idea is that for those of you that have heard about augmented reality, there's something called an AR sticker, augmented reality sticker. The augmented reality sticker is something where you would hold up your phone while looking at somebody or something, and you tap on the object, like you could tap on someone's shirt, and you could put a sticker there, like a little turtle. And when you move your phone around, that little turtle will stay attached to the person. This is now considered a pretty standard thing. It happens like kids that are using Snapchat or Facebook's built-in chat, Instagram. They all have some kind of augmented reality sticker built in. We wanted to make that real with a laser. So if you were trying to show someone how to assemble Legos remotely, what you could do is take this mobile interface. You could be 1,000 miles away and someone shows you a picture of what they're working on, and then you put your finger on your phone and say, I want you to grab this piece. And when you do that, the laser swings and points at that piece. So the person observing it is actually seeing a laser dot right there. So this idea, this is still in its very early stages, but this is just a very first step where when we watched people that were doing this kind of teleassistance operation, It turns out without the ability to point, it's actually quite frustrating. I know when I'm helping my mom who lives in Florida with computer stuff, or her router is giving her trouble, I wish I could just reach through the phone and say, this thing, hit that key, or unplug this thing. And with this type of technology, you'd actually be able to have the laser just point. Like, this is the button, hit this and reset it. So that's where we're headed. This is just a preliminary system. It still has a bit too much error right now, but it's something that we're working on. But this is a glimpse of where I'm headed with augmented reality research. This is happening in the building right across the walkway over there. We're also working, that current version is pretty bulky and it involves big motors, but we're also working on a little one that's like this size, something that you could, like this, that you could just clip onto your shirt, and it would have a little camera and a little laser on it, and then it could do the dual roles of sending the video information to a remote party, and also that ability for that person to point at things arbitrarily. So that concludes what I wanted to say. I particularly want to thank Google because they funded nearly all of this work through a Focused Research Award. And of course, I want to thank you for your attention, and just open it up for general questions. So thank you for your attention.